something on this channel that I've always advocated for is the idea of breaking away, trying to free ourselves from the dependence upon this system. The system that enslaves us, system that is ethnically displacing us, system that plunders us, a system that promotes mental illness, horrible degeneracy. That's something I've always advocated for. And even though a very popular guy in the dissident right or whatever would probably label me as the worst of the worst, as being a sort of schizo, black-pilled accelerationist. You know, I don't really care about such labels. I don't really care about people's opinions on such things. Because, I mean, how many times have, you know, you're a schizo if you believe in conspiracies. You're a black-pilled accelerationist if you just don't want to engage the system, because you see the system for what it is, you know. A lot of times it seems over the last 2 years the schizos have been proven correct on a lot of things. You know, I advocate for returning to a more simple life. Something that Varg Vikernes has often mentioned. To return to a life that is much more in line with our native European biospirit. I think all of us should be trying to live rurally, get out to the countryside. That's why I make a lot of these videos in the woods here behind our house. You know, this is our natural habitat. Our natural habitat is not some concrete jungle. Our natural habitat is neither a concrete jungle or some decadent suburb with finely manicured lawns, where if you talk to a lot of people, you notice that there is a certain facade regarding them. Unfortunately, something I've learned since living down here in the last 2 years is that a lot of people you meet in a suburb are just fake, you know. I don't want to get too sidetracked here. This video is going to be a rambling one. And I'm going to be discussing something that I've only heard one guy that I can think of that has been talking about this the last couple of years or so. Plenty of us advocate for breaking away from the system. Last week, I had my friend the Woodlander come onto my stream. It was a very good stream, and he is a man that has done very well, you know, working hard and weaning himself, his family's dependence from the system. You know, he provides a blueprint for us. I really appreciate him coming on because, you know, he took a couple of hours out of his busy schedule to come talk to my small channel here. I really appreciate that. It was very kind of him. But you know, something else too that I've not heard any but one of our guys talk about is this idea of perhaps forming these sort of white syndicates to look out for white interests. Now, I know a lot of people will think this is unorthodox, this is unconventional. My friend Pat put a link to his channel in the box below. He's talked about, as society deteriorates, as civilization declines, that something that should be looked into is the formation of syndicates Now, I'm not talking necessarily, you know, anytime anyone hears the word syndicate, they automatically think of, you know, a criminal syndicate. And for good reason, you know, we know of the various ethnic syndicates that have popped up over the Western world, especially here in the United States back in, you know, starting, I guess, in the 1890s, 1900s. What he proposes, though, is not a necessarily a criminal syndicate, although the syndicate should not be above doing crime in order to achieve its objectives. You know, over the last, if you've paid any attention to the news cycle, and it's hard not to here lately because, you know, we're so inundated with news from all these sources. I mean, even if you don't own a TV and you spend time online, you're inundated with news. I think things are accelerating, whether you like it or not. Here in the United States, the price of everything is skyrocketing. I'm sure it's the same across the world. We've had a lot of gun violence here in this region, here in southeast Tennessee. Just the other day we had a mass shooting. And although it's probably typical gang violence, you could say, still, with all the things happening around, it seems to be that the world's getting crazier. You know, the syndicate, I think its primary function should be to protect white people, to protect dissidents who can't go to the police. Now, I used to be a criminal, and something that I've noticed that is sorely lacking here in the dissident right is a definite lack of criminal knowledge. People here, a lot of them don't know their rights. They don't know how to operate in such a world. Therefore, a lot of them get caught up in things. Here in the future, I'm going to might make a series of videos where I talk about some of these subjects. One mistake a lot of the idiots on our side may make is believing that the police is on their side. Some of them are even stupid enough to try to talk to the feds. Can you believe that? And you know, I mean, even in the criminal world years ago, when I was involved in such things, I was surprised at the stupidity of some people that I knew. Some of them would call the law over something, yet get hemmed up from their stupidity. You do not call the fucking police. Because a lot of times, and I've seen this so many times, when you call the police, you're just asking for problems. They will cause problems for you. The police are not your friends. And don't think for one fucking second you're smart enough to outsmart the feds. Are you fucking stupid? You don't talk to these motherfuckers. You know, another thing my friend Pat has talked about, and the other day I read through the 88 Precepts that was written by David Lane. You know, something that Pat has mentioned is there needs to be a code, a sort of code that is more modernized. You know, the 88 Precepts was written a good while ago. We need a new code, and there's a lot of thought that could go into this. The only thing I would insist on, though, is a form of what you would call white omerta. If you know what the Code of Omerta was that the Sicilian Mafia used to use. You never talk to police or authorities. If you are wronged, if you are ripped off, you handle it yourself. Or you just bear it. One of the two. Preferably you handle it yourself. You don't go to authorities. And you know, the reason I'm talking about the syndicate is that I think that the future is criminal. I know this seems, outlandish, this seems unorthodox, this seems unconventional. But if you think about it, we live in unorthodox and unconventional times. And these times will require unconventional and unorthodox methods. Now, like I said, the syndicate should protect white interests. I think it should be localized. I think it should be decentralized. Something the Woodlander often speaks about is localism, worrying about your own community. Excuse me. These syndicates, I think, should be based on a model of what the Holy Vam, or Vamgericht. If you don't know what the Holy Vam was, I made this video here a few months ago talking about it. It was a secret society that used vigilante justice to clean up Westphalia, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, during the Middle Ages. During this time, the region of Westphalia in what is now Germany was a very lawless region. Lots of highwaymen, lots of criminals. And the Holy Vam was ruthlessly efficient in cleaning up the criminality. At first it enjoyed, the blessing of the Catholic Church. But after about 100 years, after about a century or so, the Vam worked so ruthlessly efficient at cleaning up Westphalia that they became quite powerful. And eventually, I believe, the Catholic Church began to feel threatened by the Holy Vam. I think this is something worth considering, worth looking into. And I've got some ideas here about the syndicate, about how it could operate. Although this is just me putting ideas out there, by no means is this some hardened blueprint, I guess you could say. It's just some food for thought, Like I said, this video is going to be rambling. But I think the future is criminal. And let me explain why. Now, the future is criminal because if you are a dissident, if you're here in the DR, as they call it, you can go ahead and consider yourself a thought criminal. You are, because you go against the grain of everything that, this Western liberal democracy touts as its values. You go against the grain. You reject it. You're a thought criminal. You don't buy into diversity. You don't buy into the LGBTQP plus bullshit. You're more traditional. You're already a thought criminal, right? That's why I don't understand why dissidents, for whatever reason, perhaps they feel threatened or whatever, call the police. The police are not your friends. And I think what we've seen over the last decade, and what we will continue to see, there's a very thin line between a thought criminal and becoming an actual criminal. A very thin line. And I think what we've seen over the last decade and what we will continue to see is that this line will become blurred, it will become distorted, and it will become contorted. So we're not that far away from becoming criminals. Truly. Not a lot of difference between a thought criminal and an actual criminal. I'll have some more to talk about this here shortly. Now I know a lot of people will probably say that this is kooky and that this is, a schizo opinion or whatever, a black-pilled accelerationist opinion. I don't really care though, because we need to work to survive. I mentioned the Holy Vam and their use of vigilante justice. I've said before, if you think about it, vigilante justice is the most effective and ruthless justice You know, back when I was a criminal, oftentimes I was to a degree, more worried about what other criminals that I knew were doing. You know, sometimes I was worrying about being robbed, all these things. Even worse. I was much more worried about them, to be honest, than the police, although the police is always a threat, of course. And if you talk to other criminals or people that's been engaged in such a lifestyle, they will tell you the same things. The same exact things I just said. Vigilante justice is effective justice. It also works good as a deterrent against what you could say potential offenders. Now, because I mean, if you think about it, the legal system, this bloated monstrosity of a legal system that we have, this bureaucratic nonsense, you know, vigilante justice surpasses it. It's brutal, and it's quick, and it should be. You know, as our societies, as our civilization declines, because it's undeniable that we are in a state of decline. You letting Loki out here?
Yeah.
Come on, Loki. What are you doing, bud? You want to sit up here with me? Are you good? Okay. Anyways, where was I? You know, we're in a state of decline. I foresee that, given the current trajectory of things, that the United States here, we're going to end up resembling Latin America, the Caribbean, while Europe is going to be a horrific hodgepodge of the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa. These groups that are coming in, we already see it. You know, the Pakistani grooming gangs there in the United Kingdom and all throughout, you know, our nations that they are given such good incentives by NGOs to come to. They're already tribbing up and forming these little syndicates, although their main focus is destruction and profit. Hopefully, the syndicate will never degenerate into such a thing, because I mean, oftentimes I'll be honest with you, syndicates do become criminal for profit, unfortunately. Hopefully that won't happen, although it's something that I wonder if can be avoided. But for the meantime, for survival, as our countries are flooded with these invaders, we need to break away from the system, but we also need a sort of underground syndicate to look out for us. And you know, as society deteriorates, things are going to become more lawless. And this will present some opportunities. If you've ever read William Luther Pierce's Turner Diaries, this is something that he discusses in that book about how the police force, the investigation agencies and such, they become more diversified, so they become more inefficient, obviously. I think that's something that we can count on happening, although I do see technology, the rapid growth of technology, as a sort of wild card, as a sort of dark horse in this whole thing. But as I said, I think it should be decentralized and localized, and the syndicates, they could operate in urban, suburban, or even rural areas. You know, here in this country, here in the United States, Biden is having migrants bust to all these far-flung regions of white America. You know, I wouldn't be surprised in the next 20 years if I don't see the small village that I was born and raised in and lived in until a few years ago. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it become more diverse. And you know, in such a case, I've already had an idea. You know, the Holy Vame, Our syndicate could be called the Hauler Vame. Some things that I would insist on these syndicates being. The syndicate will not be for everybody. It should be men that are capable of violence and men of character. Not necessarily men of upstanding morals. Because after all, if you're engaged in vigilante justice, you will be labeled a criminal and possibly tried if you are caught. I would insist on these men having a criminal knowledge, of being intelligent. I know these are a lot of standards, and perhaps the VAME, I would prefer it to be small, but there could be, associates under it. Somewhat similar to how the Mafia worked, Cosa Nostra. Although hopefully it won't become so corrupted. That's something that perhaps when the time comes that perhaps there could be mechanisms put in place to prevent such a disaster. And I think it would be a way for us to protect ourselves, We have to put up a fearsome front, to be honest. A lot of times you see, and this is something that irritates me and I've spoke about before to no end, is people in the DR posting videos of whites being beaten, this or that. I think this just reinforces the victimhood narrative. If you put out a fearsome front, I can guarantee you 95% of minority on white violence would stop. Quit being a fucking victim. Defend yourself. And be ruthless in doing so. These are just some ideas. I've also always been, since I learned about them years ago, I've also always been extremely interested in the Order. The group that Robert J. Matthews and David Lane had. They used crime to achieve their objectives, and they were extremely efficient there for a while before their luck ran out. These were men of direct action. They used robbery, murder. It's alright, bud. And I think they were a little too revolutionary for their time. William Luther Pierce even told Matthews this himself. And we can learn from them. But yes, like I said, these are just some ideas. We can learn from these past groups. These informal groups. Another thing about the VAME, or these syndicates, is I don't think they should be formal. Perhaps they should have an initiation ritual of sorts. One of the things that they should operate is if they find an informant in their midst, in their ranks, need I say what the informant's fate should be? Our side needs to learn more about criminal knowledge. Now, I'm not encouraging people to go engage in criminal acts. I'm not encouraging it, but I'm not going to disavow it either. But you should be aware of things, and that's what I'm going to try to do here in the future, is make a series of videos talking about this. There's some good sources I have on this topic that I'd like to read to you. I might do a stream about it. You don't talk to police. You don't talk to feds. You avoid them like the plague. You don't call them when you're in need. You need to be able to defend yourself. Be self-reliant. Because this system isn't your friend. The police aren't your friend. And they often say that snitches get stitches. Well, I think this is wrong, to be honest. I think snitches end up in ditches. I'm serious. If you ever hear of someone being an informant, they never quit being an informant. Once you let the authorities pop your proverbial cherry, they'll always come back to you. And this is something I learned too many years ago. A lot of times when people snitch, you know, the cops will, or the authorities, whoever, will act like your friend and like you're doing them a valuable service. This is all a fucking facade. They are not your friend. In fact, they respect you even less than the criminals that they are after. And on a long enough timeline, and there's other stuff that I've read over the last few weeks that proves this, and I've heard stories of it in my own personal life, that if you are a snitch, sooner or later, the people you work for, they're going to feed you to someone that you fucked over. Someone that's going to correct things. They will. We need more character on this side. More will, more backbone. We need men who are not going to cave to pressure and fear. We need men who are going to stay the course. Anyways, this video's been long enough. I apologize for its rambling aspect. I do this unscripted. I just talk to the camera. I know this is all unconventional and unorthodox, but like I said, we live in unconventional and unorthodox times. We're going to have to think outside the box. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.